Step into the time machine of your imagination and set the dials for the so-called Dark Ages. The name alone conjures images of shadowy castles, grimy peasants, and a world shrouded in ignorance. But history, as it so often does, delights in surprising us. The medieval era was anything but a stagnant backwater. It was a time of dazzling innovation, vibrant culture, and mysteries that still puzzle us today. So, fellow explorers, are you ready to journey into the heart of the Middle Ages? Let's cast aside the cliches and discover the real stories, full of strange fashions, curious customs, and the everyday lives of people not so different from ourselves. Imagine walking down a bustling street in 14th century London. What catches your eye? Perhaps it's the shoes. Leather slippers with toes so long and pointed they could double as a weapon or a conversation starter. These were the poulaines, the must-have fashion statement for medieval men. Some shoes stretched several inches beyond the foot. A symbol of status and, let's be honest, a bit of medieval swagger. Not everyone was a fan. Church officials frowned upon these extravagant shoes, claiming they made it difficult to kneel in prayer. Yet even some clerics couldn't resist the trend. There was a price to pay for style. Archaeologists have found that nearly a third of wealthy medieval skeletons show signs of bunions, painful foot deformities likely caused by these fashionable but impractical shoes. Among friars, the rate was even higher. It seems the pursuit of style over comfort is a tale as old as time. When did people marry in the Middle Ages? The answer is as varied as the people themselves. On average, men tied the knot around age 20, while women often married in their late teens. But the rules were flexible, shaped by local customs, family fortunes, and the ever-watchful eye of the church. Canon law set the minimum ages, 12 for girls, 14 for boys. Betrothals could happen even earlier, especially among the nobility, where marriage was as much about politics and property as it was about love. For most, though, marriage was a practical affair, an alliance of families, a way to secure the future, and sometimes a leap into the unknown. Medieval life was never far from the threat of conflict. Training for battle began early, often through games, tournaments, and mock fights that honed the skills needed for real warfare. In the early Middle Ages, training was informal, more a matter of necessity than discipline. By the late Middle Ages, detailed combat manuals appeared, reflecting the growing sophistication of military tactics. Yet even as armies became more organized, the idea of a permanent professional force was rare. It wasn't until the mid-15th century, during the 100 Years' War, that France created one of the first standing armies in Europe, a sign of how much the art of war had changed. What about women? While their primary responsibilities often centered on the home, women's lives were far from confined. During harvest, they joined men in the fields. Noble women, meanwhile, could be found hunting, managing estates, and even defending castles in times of siege. The medieval world was complex, and women's roles were as varied as the society itself. Some women became powerful abbesses, managing large religious communities and even advising kings. Others, like Hildegard of Bingen, became renowned for their scholarship, music, and scientific observations, showing that intellectual life was not reserved for men alone. No medieval fair or court was complete without music. Enter the minstrels and troubadours, wandering performers who brought news, stories, and songs to life. Some recited epic tales of heroes and battles. Others composed their own verses, accompanied by lutes, harps, or early violins. Their music was the social media of the day, spreading news and entertainment across kingdoms. Troubadours in southern France even invented new forms of poetry and song, influencing European literature for centuries to come. Here's a riddle. If you lived in a medieval village, would you know what year it was? For most, the answer was not exactly. Few could read or write, and the concept of a numbered year mattered little in daily life. What mattered was the rhythm of the seasons, the time to plant, to harvest, to celebrate religious festivals. Monks and royal officials kept track of years, but for the average person, time was measured in cycles, not numbers. The church calendar, with its saints' days and feast days, was the true clock of the countryside. Pilgrimages were the great adventures of the Middle Ages. People traveled for weeks or months to visit holy sites, hoping for miracles or forgiveness. Seeing a relic, a saint's bone, a splinter of the true cross, was a highlight. There was no ticket booth, but pilgrims often made offerings, both as a sign of devotion and to support the church. The authenticity of relics was sometimes questionable, but their power to inspire awe was very real. Pilgrimages also helped spread ideas, art, and even new foods across Europe, as travelers brought back stories and souvenirs from distant lands. Medieval manuscripts show fishermen with nets and rods, proving that angling was both a necessity and a pastime. Meanwhile, the world of money was changing fast. Catholic rules against usury, charging interest, meant that Jewish families often became bankers, filling a vital role in the growing economy. By the 14th century, new types of bankers emerged: merchant bankers, moneylenders, and deposit bankers, each navigating the tricky waters of commerce, faith, and law. Records from Italy and beyond show that debt collection was serious business, sometimes continuing even after a person's death. The rise of banking was a sign of a world becoming more connected, more ambitious, and more modern than we might expect. Medieval people, far from being isolated, were part of a world more connected than we often imagine. Trade routes stretched from English ports to the markets of Venice, and from there, goods and ideas traveled as far as the Middle East and China. Spices, silks, and stories all made their way into medieval homes, changing tastes and sparking new inventions. Even the humble fork, now a staple at every dinner table, was a medieval innovation that took centuries to catch on in Europe. For a long time, people ate with knives, spoons, and their fingers. When the fork finally arrived, it was considered scandalously decadent by some. Proof that even the smallest changes could stir up big debates. Medieval cities, too, were marvels of ingenuity. London, Paris, and Florence bustled with markets, universities, and guilds. The first universities like Bologna and Oxford were founded in this era, where students debated philosophy, medicine, and law. The great cathedrals, with their soaring arches and stained glass, were not just places of worship, but also centers of art, science, and community life. Building them required advanced mathematics and engineering, and their beauty still inspires awe today. Medieval engineers also built aqueducts, windmills, and water wheels, harnessing the power of nature in ways that would lay the groundwork for later technological revolutions. Let's not forget the written word. While most people could not read, the Middle Ages saw the slow but steady spread of literacy. Monks in quiet scriptoria copied ancient texts by hand, preserving the wisdom of Greece and Rome. By the late Middle Ages, the invention of the printing press would soon revolutionize the world, making books and knowledge available to more people than ever before. The spread of paper from China through the Islamic world and into Europe made writing cheaper and more accessible, fueling a quiet revolution in communication. So the next time you hear the phrase Dark Ages, remember the light that shone through, the laughter of minstrels, the courage of knights and scholars, the hands that built cathedrals, and the minds that dreamed of a wider world. The Middle Ages were not just a bridge between ancient and modern. They were a world of their own, full of color, curiosity, and the same human spirit that drives us today. Thank you for traveling through time with me. Keep your sense of wonder alive, and who knows what other secrets history might reveal.